Welcome to Cedar's Compass, where we explore the dynamic interplay between our inner landscape and our planet's ecology. Delve deep into the worlds of science, medicine, and philosophy as we discover the threads that weave us into the larger tapestry of life on Earth. So when we're talking about the gut-brain axis, digestion, there's kind of a buzzword in the gastroneuroenterology field where people like to talk about the second brain, right? We all think of our brain as this, the first major, this is the place where really most of life is happening, most of our experience is happening. But we've kind of acknowledged this second brain, right? Which is, the mesenteric brain, meaning it's built of the nerves that surround our digestive structures. And, I think the first thing that stands out to me is that there's two sides of it. There's an evolutionary perspective, and then there's sort of like a cultural importance perspective. And the cultural importance perspective is that the brain is a very central feature in culture. When we get into art and science and music and creativity and language and all the things that we've been able to evolve in our culture, once we establish sort of like, hey, we've got our food taken care of, we've got our shelter taken care of, and now we're able to live in communities and we've got this time and space, now we've got all this accessibility for culture and this opportunity to develop culture. And so that's where I think the first brain idea comes from, and this brain inside my head and this very complex nervous system. But going deeper into the evolutionary perspective, there's this ancient story that every bit of life as we know it in the animal kingdom is basically a tube that brings something in one end, the mouth side, and moves it through a process of digestion, which includes absorption, assimilation, and excretion, and then releases those contents that are left over at the end, whatever it's going to let go of, right? And there's an integration process inside of this tube where the tube itself is sort of experiencing this digestive process. And it, like at a fundamental level, just like the idea that life is just sort of like to eat something. You think about a child, right? When it's first alive in the world, it's like, oh, what is that thing? I don't know, let me put it in my mouth, right? But go back, way back evolutionarily, I'm gonna experience it by eating it. And so that's where, to me, the first brain in the evolutionary perspective is in the gut. And this is where I think that we can probably use both terms. We can probably talk of either one, first brain or second brain, depending on the context you put it in. But for me, generally, I'm a guy who I like the evolutionary theory. I like the story. I like thinking about life in terms of a buildup from something very small, from these microbes all the way through to the complexity that we are today. And so I think of the mesenteric nervous system as the first brain. And so from there, I think it's important to consider that for myself as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine who views life from a Taoist perspective, from one that's very macroscopic, very ecologically based, that the perspective on the digestive system in Chinese medicine is that it's the center of our mind. And that's different than our brain, right? We're talking about the brains and the different brains, the first brain and the second brain. But if we talk about the mind and the intellect and the intelligence, what in Chinese medicine would be called the yi, that's really centered in the digestive system, okay? And we talk about it as the spleen organ network in Chinese medicine, which is it's a functional organ network that's composed of the duodenum, the upper part of the digestion. It's composed of part of the stomach. It's composed of the pancreas, the pancreatic enzymes, duodenal enzymes together, part of the gallbladder and liver function. But that digestive center that does that work that I was describing in that tube. But we've complexified the tube a lot over evolutionary, eons to become what it is today in our bodies, this complex alimentary canal that's really housed inside of these organ networks, all linked together by nerves, right? And nerve pathways, nervous systems within systems that are communicating about the experience of digesting life. And so digesting life, of course, you eat something, you break it down into smaller bits. You got hydrochloric acid in the stomach, you chop it up, you get it down into the duodenum. You've got to put some, buffer in there to calm it down so it's not too hot to burn up the tissues in the duodenum. And once you cool it down, then you add a bunch of enzymes to refine that digestive process so the little bits can be small enough that your body can start absorbing them. And then once you absorb them, you pull them into the tissues, you circulate through the bloodstream, then you assimilate that into your body, into the tissues everywhere, and then you decide what you're going to let go of. Well, that's the physical process of digesting life. And what's so beautiful about this kind of macroscopic ecological perspective is that it doesn't just happen on the physical plane, it's happening at the emotional level too. And we can use that same analogy, that same process to talk about the way that we process or digest a life experience.